folks. Welcome to the Caledonia Gathering Online. My name is Corey, and I am sending this welcome your way from my office, the space that we usually record in. Somebody is hanging out in another room close to that, working out, I think. They're in the sort of athletic facility, and music is pumping, and you just can't hear anything on the recording. So I am now in my office saying hey to you. Welcome to worship. We're so glad that you're here. You know, it's our mission to tell people about the life and love of Jesus and to inspire you to learn to live and love like him. So if that's something you're interested in and you haven't done so yet, I really want to encourage you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below. Now, I got to be honest, I pre-recorded the message, so the message is in the space. Don't worry, you don't have to follow my spinning head for the entire message today, but this welcome is in my office. So hey, we're glad you're here. Let's get things going by putting our hearts and our minds at the right place and singing together. Let's sing.
When the music fades and all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to bring something that's a word that will bless your heart. And I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. Now I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. And I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I made it, when it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus.
It's all about
Well, hey there, folks. Welcome back to our series called How to Be Happy. And of course, if this is your first time joining us, I want to encourage you to actually push pause and go back to week 1 to check out the first message on this series called Humility, Being Poor in Spirit, because it's really important that you hear that message before you hear this or really any of the other messages in the series. I mean, you can watch and listen to this in whatever order you want, but make sure the first one goes first. So go back, How to Be Happy, Part 1, Humility. Go check that out and then come back and we'll get going on this one. Now, for the rest of us, we're going to continue down Jesus' somewhat counterintuitive list of attitudes that he says will lead to happiness. The list is called the Beatitudes. Now, beatitude is just a Latin word that means happy. And so far, we've taken up 2 of those Beatitudes, to be poor in spirit and to mourn. Now, somehow, according to Jesus, humility and sadness are actually keys to living the happy life. And today, that counterintuitive thinking is going to continue. And here's the third statement. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now, if you're like me, when you think of the word meek, you've got some picture in your mind of what it means. But my guess is that you're not exactly sure, are you? It's not really a clear picture. Whatever it is, it's probably something frail or breakable, but it's certainly something weak, right? And I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, have you ever read the dictionary definition for meek? This is what it says. It says, meek is to be quiet, gentle, and easily imposed upon. The synonyms for meek are to be submissive, obedient, compliant, tamed, yielding, tractable, acquiescent, deferential, unprotesting, unresistant, like a lamb led to the slaughter. Yikes! Docile, unassuming, not assertive. I mean, Jesus says that's who's going to inherit the earth. That's who's going to win the day. That's who's going to wind up on top of it all at the end of it all, and therefore be happy. Which to us makes no sense, right? I mean, certainly not to me. In 2019, I read over 25 books and listened to over 900 podcast episodes, all claiming to give me the secret to happiness in one way or another. The topics of information were varied. I mean, it covered finances, leadership, spiritual growth, physical fitness, mental toughness, professional development, and so much more. But I was constantly reading and listening to things that promised to make me happy in one way or another, in one area or another of my life. And guess how many of those books and podcast episodes said that I should be like a lamb led to the slaughter? 0, exactly, none, because that's not what success or happiness in our culture look like, right? I mean, we live in a personal ambition, find your passion, make a difference, solve the problems, resolve it all, get it right, save the world type culture. The way to be happy is to get after it, to get on it, to stay on top of it, to get up and go, achieve, accumulate, attain more. That's how you can be happy. And yet, here stands Jesus with this beautiful view of the Lake of Galilee behind him. And he says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Now, before we talk about what that might mean for you and for me, I want you to understand what that was like for the disciples. Because their confusion, I think, would have matched yours, if not far surpassed it. Because when they heard the words, will inherit the earth, they heard, get your land back. As in the land that was promised to your ancestors and rightfully should be yours. The land that's currently owned, occupied, and operated by the Roman Empire. Land that should have been theirs, but was being overrun by somebody else. In fact, the disciples themselves found this scenario so frustrating that they and some of their friends and family members had actually participated in multiple attempts over the previous decades to take their land back. And those attempts always ended with pain and bloodshed, tears. I mean, they threw everything they had at the Romans, and it was never enough. They were going to need more strength, more weapons, more power in order to overthrow the empire. And yet here stands Jesus, promising a new era, promising that a new day has dawned. And the people who are going to find happiness in this new era, the ones who will actually at some point inherit the land back, those who are going to win the day, are the meek? I mean, how in the world is living like a lamb led to the slaughter going to overthrow an empire? I mean, if people were starting to walk away last week when they heard Jesus say, actually happy are those who are sad, they were definitely going to start walking away now, or at least considering it heavily. Jesus, I don't know if you know this, but they have horses and chariots. They have spears and legions of soldiers. I mean, how in the world is living like a dead sheep walking going to overcome all of that and get our land back? Now, that's a fair question from the disciples. Now, I think in order to answer that, there are really two questions here that need to be answered. The first is, well, what does Jesus mean when he says, blessed are the meek? And then the second, to the disciples' frustration, is how is being meek going to lead to inheriting the earth? But let's start with the first one. Let's start with what Jesus meant by meekness. You see, the Greek word that Jesus used when he said, blessed are the meek, was the word praus, which is often translated as gentle. Praus carries with it this idea of a person who is submissive and humble, patient, and gentle with others. Now, this is incredibly important to understand. Meekness is not necessarily weakness, but rather it describes someone's response to a given circumstance. In any circumstance, you can choose to respond humbly or arrogantly, submissively or combatively. Meek does not necessarily equal weak. I'll give you an example from life. A couple of weeks ago, I was visiting a friend to get some help with my car. And when I arrived at his farm, I saw the space that he was clearing out behind the house in order to construct a horse barn. And while I was admiring the sort of ongoing construction, his wife came over and told me the story of how she had acquired this horse that was going to be housed inside that horse barn. She also shared with me during that conversation, unfortunately, about the first time she ever tried to ride that horse that she purchased. Initially, it threw her off and into a fence. And she was still sore and a little bit shaken from that experience as she shared it with me. Now, since that time, the horse has been broken, which is the term that describes the process of taming the horse, that while it has the power to inflict serious damage on those around it still, it chooses not to. The circumstance, the breaking in process, has caused the horse to be praus, to be meek. It chooses to be submissive, though it has the power to overpower its rider. It chooses to be gentle, though its hooves could easily break or crush bone. That's what praus means. It's a chosen submissiveness, humility, gentleness, and patience because of circumstance. And really, that's what Jesus says will lead to happiness. So let's talk about what those four aspects of meekness mean for a minute and see if we can't find our way to happiness for you. You see, Jesus says the meek person is submissive, meaning that they don't spend their life assuming that God owes them something better or something different, a different experience, a different existence, a better lot in life, but rather they submit themselves to circumstance. Whether receiving the throne of Solomon or sitting on the poop pile of Job, the meek person's hope and prayer in life is simply to receive and enjoy it as it comes. Which, if you think about it, to Jesus' point, makes perfect sense, right? I mean, if you spend your life believing that God owes you a better life than what you've been given, you're going to forever be disappointed by every situation you find yourself in. I mean, it's hard to enjoy where you are when you constantly are believing you should be somewhere else, which is perhaps where you are right now, right? I mean, maybe part of the reason that you're unhappy, if you find yourself unhappy, is because you believe you deserve a better circumstance in life, that somehow God owes you something better than your current lot. And maybe he does, and maybe he doesn't. But the meek person chooses to submit themselves to whatever circumstance God gives, hoping to find enjoyment in it. Now, the second aspect of being a meek person is that the meek is also a humble person. The proud person, on the contrary, believes that they're owed something better in life, that they deserve the earth and everything in it, but But to be meek is to be humble. Humble towards God, like submissive, and also humble towards others. It's to understand that even the best of people are still people at best. Broken, flawed, and relatively insignificant in the grand scheme of eternity. And so the meek person doesn't boast about accomplishments or achievements. The meek person doesn't demand recognition for the money they've made or the success that they've accumulated in life. They don't pump themselves up because, well, they know that God doesn't really judge a person based on any of those things. In so many ways, meekness is opposed to any semblance of prideful, selfish ambition. The meek person simply sees their gifts, developed or underdeveloped as they are, as opportunities to serve others, rather than seek power or recognition for themselves. And again, to Jesus' point, this makes perfect sense. I mean, if you need a constant flow of applause and approval and praise from other people for the things that you do, you'll never be truly, truly happy. Now, third, the meek person is also gentle towards others. They don't demand positions of power so that they can threaten or coerce people into behaving the way they'd like everybody else to behave. And at the same time, they don't sit arrogantly on a mountaintop, looking down their noses at people, watching the way they live their lives. They aren't harsh with the people around them, whether through a keyboard or face-to-face. Because, again, they understand that even the best of people are still people at best. And so they are gentle, even if they have the power to be harsh. They restrain their strength for the sake of somebody else. I once heard somebody describe gentleness in this way. They said it's like having a sword, but refusing to unsheath it. Gentleness isn't powerlessness, but it's rather choosing not to use your power in order to benefit somebody. Now, if you'd like an example of the opposite of gentleness, just cruise social media for the next couple of months. You will see all kinds of harsh words that stir up anger, defeat dialogue, and force people on the defensive constantly. But gentleness does something different. Gentleness kneels before its enemies, and it seeks opportunities to serve others. And man, is that ever counterintuitive and countercultural? You might even think, how in the world, Jesus, could you ask that of me? My guess is that it's probably because of the fourth and final feature of meekness, and that's patience. The meek person is patient in circumstance and patient with those around them. Why? Well, because the meek person recognizes that ultimately justice belongs to God. And so until God brings about full justice on earth, I'm going to put up with the people around me, just like I imagine God has to put up with me. I'm going to have patience in my relationships, knowing that people change really slowly. And the reason I know that is because I'm the best example of a person who changes slowly. And I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt rather than jumping down their throats or jumping to conclusions. And when obvious evil is committed, I'm going to oppose evil. I'm going to be angry with evil. But I'm going to patiently work to forgive the perpetrator. You know, there's this old phrase about patience that says, little pots boil over quickly. Meek people are not little pots. Little pots describes those people, you know these people, perhaps you are one of these people who allow every little offense in life to send them over the edge and to rage and fits of anger. Meek people, though. Meek people have a deep well of grace for others that rarely, if ever, boils over. And again, to Jesus' point, if you don't have a depth of grace for people, but instead you're like a little pot, you will forever be boiling over at every headline or traffic line or checkout line, every small glance or unthoughtful comment or missed handshake, forever angry with everything and everyone. I mean, geez, it's hard to be happy that way, isn't it? But Jesus says that happy are the meek. Happy are the submissive, the humble, the gentle, and the patient. Now, to our second question and the disciples' main concern, how in the world does being meek lead to inheriting the earth? I mean, the disciples, had they had the opportunity, they would have demanded to know that from Jesus. How in the world do meek people inherit the land, Jesus? How does submissiveness, humility, gentleness, and patience overthrow a Roman Empire and usher in this new era that you keep talking about? And I think, had they asked Jesus that question, I think Jesus would have calmly answered them. Follow me, and I'll show you. And lucky for you and me, because of the record of the Gospels that we have, we're actually able to read and do just that. You can read and follow, watching as Jesus humbly serves those around him without ever demanding recognition. Even serving the Romans, whom his disciples would have hated so much, or the Samaritans that they couldn't stand. You could follow him as he gently welcomed children, blessed them, or watched while he took time for society's most rejected people, like tax collectors, prostitutes, and people with leprosy. You could follow Jesus and read about him as he patiently dealt with his disciples, who over and over and over again, assumed that the whole kingdom thing that Jesus kept talking about was just an earthly political system that would overturn how things were so that finally things could go the way we want them to go for once. And you can watch as again and again Jesus would remind them that this kingdom is not of this world. His kingdom is not of this world. It's so much bigger than your temporary earthly political pursuits. And you could also watch then as Jesus submits himself to those in power, to those who tortured him, abused him, beat him, and then crucified him. You could watch as he submitted himself to the circumstance of death, even death on a cross, without fighting back. You might even say, like a lamb led to the slaughter. And 3 days later, you could watch with the disciples as God raised him from the dead, proving that not even death can put a stop to Jesus and his kingdom. Which is what the disciples did, right? They watched that. And when they saw Jesus resurrected from the dead, when they saw that death was not going to be the end of it all, I mean, it took away something inside of them that was holding them back. It took away the fear of pain and suffering. It took away the fear of death. And that kind of empowered those disciples to preach the known world, to preach to everyone they met, everything they knew about Jesus, inspiring people everywhere to live and love like him. And because of that, all over the Roman Empire, little pockets of people started popping up who no longer feared death. And so they stopped trying to overturn the political situation with the old way of revolting. They stopped trying to get their land back, and instead, they devoted themselves to humility, gentleness, and patience. They chose meekness. And insanely enough, I mean, this is crazy. The powerless population of meek people eventually converted so many in the empire that the same empire that initially tried to stamp Christianity out eventually itself became Christian. And as astounding as that was, even that wasn't the inheritance of the earth that Jesus was talking about in the first place. I mean, Jesus' promise was that those who are meek, not only will they be happy in this life, but ultimately they will inherit the new earth. In other words, when Jesus returns and establishes his kingdom fully on earth, and he does away with everything that is evil and twisted and broken, it's the humble, the gentle, and the patient who are going to inherit that new world. It's not the arrogant, the proud, those who seek power or recognition. It's the meek. Now, I wonder if there's something there for us, especially those of us in the sort of North American church. I wonder if there's something there for us to hear. That it's not those who seek power and demand recognition. It's not the selfishly ambitious who inherit the earth. That's incredible. I mean, on my more cynical days, I'd say that's a basic broad definition of what it means to be American. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Personal freedom is our highest priority, and the best way to effect any change might require sacrificing my integrity in order to keep my people in power. I mean, like I said, you and I are not unique. The disciples would have struggled just as much, if not more than us, with this idea that the meek inherit the earth. Submission, humility, gentleness, and patience. Jesus, these don't feel like world-changing attitudes. And yet, as counterintuitive as it is, Jesus said this was how to be happy today, and that it's the meek who will inherit a someday that will be better than this day. But better than just saying it, eventually Jesus walked off that hilltop and he lived it. And that's what led the disciples to go out and live it too. And so friends, as crazy as it sounds, choose meekness. Choose to submit yourself to the lot you've been given in life, and choose humility, gentleness, and patience in your interactions with others. Why? Because that's where deep happiness can be found. And those who do are going to inherit something so much greater than the happiness that's just temporary for today. And besides, and you know this is what Jesus eventually walked off that mountain and chose to do for you and for me. I mean, if you think about it, Jesus didn't show up with an army of horses and chariots to overthrow a world order. He chose to be meek. He chose meekness for us. Jesus didn't gather an army to threaten and coerce you to come into his kingdom. He's not arrogantly demanding that you get on his level. He's not screaming at you with harsh words or impatiently tapping his foot, wondering, boy, when are you going to get your spiritual act together? He chose meekness. He chose to put on flesh and walk with us, humbly, gently, patiently drawing people to himself. And when he submitted himself to death on a cross like a lamb to the slaughter, he was giving his life to pay for all of your selfishly ambitious and pridefully arrogant sins. I mean, for all the times that I thought I deserved a better lot in life, for all the times I mistreated the people around me or boiled over like a little pot, Jesus went to the cross for all of that. And when he rose from the dead, he invited his disciples then, and he's inviting you now. He's inviting you now to live this new kind of life, this happy life. Not a life defined by achievement and passion or the pursuit of power, but a life defined by humility, gentleness, and patience. Which, I mean, come on, think about it. Isn't that the kind of life we all want? Isn't that the kind of world we all want to live in? I mean, what if meekness defined your family? What if meekness defined your marriage? What if meekness defined your friendships? What if our church was defined by humility and gentleness? Or what about your house gathering? What if humility and gentleness defined our nation or our world? Look, I know that it's counterintuitive, but friends, Jesus said and lived this. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above, ye heavenly hosts. lifting